Welcome to the What It Takes podcast, where we talk to successful entrepreneurs, leaders, and CEOs across different industries. I'm your host, Darren, and in each episode, we're going to figure out how they got through difficult times, but most importantly, what it really takes to succeed. So whether you're just starting out your career or you're looking to level up your business game, my goal is to give you real insights and practical lessons from people who have achieved what you want. Hey everyone, welcome back to the What It Takes podcast. I'm here today with Lasse. Lasse, you are an entrepreneur. You are quite new as an entrepreneur, only 23 years old. One of the youngest people I've had on my podcast so far, but it's a pleasure to have you here today. And why don't you give a little bit of an introduction to the audience about yourself?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Darren. So, basically, to introduce myself, I would just talk a bit about what I do for work. So, I'm really deep into, or I've been deep into growth strategies with sales and marketing for the past, now I think like 5 years closing into. And then for the
Mm,
couple of last years, like since basically just language models got more easily accessible through OpenAI and Anthropic, etc., then me and my company have been just diving deep into AI. So right now we're basically just working on how we can take all of these processes that we've built for growing businesses and just automating all of them with AI, with like
mm,
the more so what I'm at least told, ludicrous goals of over time going into and building these. We call them AIVs, AI
mm,
ventures, which are basically a business which is fully autonomously run by AI. So you can
mm,
imagine that all of the marketing, all the sales of the product is done automatically, autonomously, like you have these small agents, like some software popping up and actually making more usual now. And then you
mm.
have products which are software which are generated automatically, and you have like agents that can operate the company autonomously as
Okay.
well. So that's kind of what we're working on, and that's that's basically what I live and what I breathe. Apart from that, I play a little bit of paddle, but that's basically my life.
Oh, that's pretty sick, man. So, in terms of all this AI stuff and the company you have right now, I want to kind of take it back a little bit into how you got started with entrepreneurship. What was that journey for you like going into, starting for yourself, thinking, I'm just going to go all in on entrepreneurship and not go for the regular 9 to 5? What went through your head and how old?
Well, so I would say that, and I think it's kind of cliche because I guess most people would say so, but I've always felt that thing inside of me, which was kind of saying that I didn't want to do things which were normal per se. I
Mm,
have a really normal background in terms of my education and my just family and environment, but I always felt like I was uh, not a misfit directly, but I always were kind of like I was opposing authority to some extent during my school years, and I did like if you combine that with the fact that I tried to become good in sports for a period with football, even though realistically I would never actually get any good, but I tried really desperately for a couple of years. I got
yeah.
injured. I messed up my sports career. And then I figured out, okay, I need to put this drive into something else. And then when I was introduced to the world of just entrepreneurship and seeing that, okay, there are people outside of my family and my environment that are doing things which just seem like it's more like their careers seemed more filled with, you could say, emotions like tops and bottoms, then I
Mm,
was just like sucked into that and thought, okay, I need to put like all of my effort into just becoming like a top athlete per se when it comes to entrepreneurship. So I just started
mm,
with figuring out, okay, what is the lowest barrier of entry? Because as an 18-year-old, I didn't think that I would become some sort of finance like mastermind within 6 months. I would think, okay, that would take many, many, many years.
mm,
However, I did think that I can learn niche skills such as copywriting and just sales when
mm,
speaking to people. And then I also understood that, okay, I'm 18, so if I learned sales and if I learned the psychology behind it, I'm probably a bit more fluent with the computer and with different
Mm.
software that I can use to actually provide some value. So I kind of went into that, and then I just studied that just like I would study like anything else from my schooling years. But I just dropped out of school and figured out, okay, I'll study this full time, and kind of like I still had an environment, as I said, which is extremely like traditionally driven in terms of education and jobs and stuff. So I kind of had to tell myself and tell anyone around me that I am like studying like at a university. It's just not an accredited university. It's just my own little university that I'm making up.
Mm.
And then I
Hmm.
just kept going with that.
Okay. So did you ever feel any societal pressure from friends or family? Obviously, you just mentioned that, you would tell people that you were studying, but was there ever that stigma of like, hey, I'm not going to follow the traditional path. Rather, I'm just going to focus on what I believe in is my future.
Well, I think you will see a clear distinction there. This is at least what I did from who is the closest to you and who is like semi close to you. Because the closest ones, to me at least, were kind of like stressed out, nervous about my choices, as if
Mm.
as if they seemed reckless, and they were reckless at the time. I get it, because this was during the pandemic as well, and I did other reckless things during the pandemic as well, without getting into the details there. So I had a lot of people who cared about me, who was nervous about whether I was losing my mind or whether I was onto something. And we'll see what the future entails on that note. But the ones who kind of just knew me, like the ones who don't have any stakes, you could say, in whether it
Hmm.
goes well or whether it goes bad, were kind of like supporting and thinking, okay, this is cool. I don't know if you've
Mm.
seen it yourself, but there's like this distinction, whether someone has stakes in you or not, says a lot about how they will just how they will approach your decision making. Because
Mm.
the ones who don't have stakes in whether it goes bad, they're just keen on seeing it going like good as well, if they actually
Mm.
have good intentions for you. While the
Mm.
ones who could get basically just in trouble, like if you think your closest family, like your parents, your siblings, etc., they will always be nervous for that type of thing, I believe, at least.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I've probably felt a little bit of a similar thing with people that actually have a stake in you or don't. Like when you think about your friends or the people that, they kind of look on the outside, they'll be like, I'm rooting for you. Whereas people closer to you, family, for example, may be a little bit more worried. It's like, are you sure?
Mm.
And then you got to have that conviction of, yes, I am sure. And then either they will rest a little bit easier or they'll still be a little bit uneasy, but hopefully support you on that journey.
Mm.
Now, one thing that you mentioned as well, which was very interesting, was when you first started out, you had this mindset of, I can start off with sales, right? Focusing on these niche skills. How did you understand that that is what you had to focus on? How did you know that, like, in order to do this, you had to build up these skills in these micro areas instead of just starting something big from the beginning?
Well, I think it's the influence which I had, which was basically I'm from Norway, and in Norway in 2020, when I started really getting into the rabbit hole of doing things on my own, there wasn't really any like Norwegian influencers or any Norwegian like programs that you would naturally roll into to learn these
Mm.
types of things. So I was consuming mostly international stuff, typically from the US. And at the time, at least, the focus was a lot on, and I think it still is for that sake, but on like high income skills. Like, and I just got that term got glued to my mind in terms of,
Mm.
okay, I can learn. Like I was accepted into university for studying. Was it like a bachelor in economy and administration,
Mm.
which is like, in my opinion, quite a vague study to go through, because I did it for, okay, maybe I have a bad sample size to say whether I did it or not, but I was there for like 4 weeks until I figured out I didn't want more. And I figured out that the things I was learning there were kind of like I couldn't put my finger to whether they were high income skills or not, because
Mm,
it was like, okay, learn a bit of accounting. But I'm kind of like, if I learn accounting, am I not just going to be able to do my accounting that an accountant could do? Like, what parts of these skills are actually valuable? And then you look at
mm,
leverage, like how much leverage are you able to get when you learn accounting, for example, or when you
mm,
learn like basic market trends, as what I understood that study was about, basically.
mm,
I didn't really get that. I wasn't convinced that that was some skills which yeah, were valuable enough for me to spend 3 years of my life gathering. So I figured out
mm,
that, okay, if I spend 3 years going deep into more niched things, which I know that people are already paying lots and lots of money for, not necessarily as an entrepreneur, or like not necessarily like paying. If you were to think like me at 18, I want to learn some skills. I wasn't necessarily thinking these skills will make me the best entrepreneur possible. I was just thinking that, okay,
mm,
if I learn sales and just sales psychology, then if I have those skills, that will probably give me a low or a higher, like lowest level. I don't know how to put that term into words, but you have like barriers for based on what the degree you have or what skills you have. What is the realistically lowest paid job that you would get with those skills? If it is
mm,
accounting, then you could probably have like an average paid out, like an average pay job, while if you're really, really, really good at sales psychology, you're going to have a way higher salary at even like the lowest realistic compensation level of a job you would have. So I was just thinking, okay, if I boost that significantly, it will just elevate me further than what this degree would. So that's kind of where I started, and then it naturally progressed into, okay, I can run the whole thing on my own. Let me figure
mm,
out like what other things I need to learn.
And so you start stacking skills on top of each other as you progress.
Yeah, you could say so. Like you obviously learn that, okay, I suck at XYZ skill, and then you have to figure out yeah, which way you go with it.
Hmm. So if I understand you correctly, the decision-making framework that you're using here is you look at, leverage, you look at what is going to give me the highest return over time if I just learn this skill, right? So in the case you brought up, accounting, yeah, sure, you could probably learn accounting, but then can I outsource it? Is it easy to do? Versus sales, which is a lot more with the psychology at least, the amount you can make is just so much higher, right? And so these are things that you're taking into consideration when making that decision.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's
Mm,
all about, for me at least, it's always been about what do I get for the time inputs that I put into it. When I
mm-hmm,
started working for others, basically, like when I started studying sales psychology, I reached out to lots of people just to figure out, okay, like how do I learn this the fastest? So I was like just pitching people on, I'll work 6 months completely for free. Like, don't even think about paying me anything. Like, I could not care less. I see that if I spend 6 months working in a high speed environment with the skills that were already gathered and with the intention of gathering more skills, I will get more back for that than like going anywhere else. And
mm,
to be fair, like right now we're optimizing to make money, but I would be doing something completely different if I was just fixating on how much cash am I bringing in month per month.
mm,
I'm trying
mm,
to fixate on what do I want to be doing in 20 years and where do I
mm,
want to be sitting then, because I don't really think that,
mm,
as you said, I'm 23. I don't really think at 23 I'm supposed to just go out for optimizing for how much cash I bring in. I want to optimize for how much cash I bring in 15 years.
mm. Very wise. For someone who is starting out, right, might be 23, might be 20, might be 18, which is the age, you started. What advice would you give them? Would it be to just focus on one income skill and then try and just
work for free? Or, what would you say to someone who has zero experience, who wants to start a business or at least become an entrepreneur in the future?
I would start with one skill that they would get in, like that they would just dive deep into, where they would actually have something to provide for someone that is further down the line. Not necessarily because you want to cash out from them, but so that you can be
Mm,
close to them and learn more things. But primarily, before you even learn that skill, you got to figure out how do you learn that skill. This was where I was conflicted in. Basically, when I started learning things which were, as you say, high income skills, I had, like, throughout all of the years that I've gone to like high school and junior high and elementary school and stuff, I've had things come quite easily to me, and I was
mm,
lazy for that sake.
mm,
As I said, I tried to become good in sports. That was where I actually cared. I
mm,
never really practiced learning in any sense. But what really made a difference for me was just, and this sounds obvious and it's relatable to like what you do, Darren, as well, with just the coaching that you have, which is just get your shit together. Like,
mm,
get control of your day. Like, start
mm,
using Google Calendar. Like, I was sitting after a conversation we had the other day in my calendar and just looking at 2020 when I started taking control of my life. How did my calendar look like versus in 2019? Because in 2019 I had no calendar. And right
mm,
now I think that sounds completely insane, how you can go through even school and like have the ambition of learning things, but you don't have a calendar. You just wake up whenever you do, and then you figure out, oh yeah, now it's school, or like, yeah, now I'll head over there. Like, you don't have any plans of anything. If you want
mm,
to learn something and get going, like if I were 18 again, or say at 18 I took control of my life for that sake, but if I were 15 again or 16, I would
mm,
just take myself, and I have maybe a harsh approach to that. I would like just take myself by, I don't know if that's the right word in English, but by the neck, and just like straighten myself out, like get together, like just
mhm,
start
mhm,
getting control of things. Because I don't really think that's a thing which is, I don't really believe that I would have had a like worse youth if I just took control of things and got more shit done. I just think I
mhm,
would
mhm.
come out like more, like just more prepared.
As an entrepreneur, how would you describe the changes in your life? What is the biggest difference that you've noticed about yourself after becoming an entrepreneur? And you can answer that in many different ways, how you choose to interpret it, but it could be, is it growth? Have you developed any specific character traits? What would you say is like the one thing that, yeah, this is the biggest change for me?
There's one thing that sticks out, and that's stress tolerance. So
Mm,
I remember from before, the things that could make me stressed in terms of just social interactions, in terms of like silly things from like school and studying, comparable to the things which I've had to endure over the past years. Like the changes are quite huge there, because now, like, you kind of just have to get used to it. If you're still sitting there like years down the line and you're actually growing, you need to just, in my opinion, this was at least what I went through. Like, I had like ups, and then the downs feel kind of like harder for each time, because you've set a new benchmark for yourself for what you
mm,
consider to be good and what you consider to be bad.
mm,
And during these down times, then I remember like specifically having a downtime where I was setting up a new entity in a new country, and it took forever to get like my bank account sorted and stuff. So I was effectively running around with like no cash on my credit cards.
mm,
And I just have these moments where I was sitting with my girl, like in some random Airbnb studios in Belgrade, Serbia. Like during January, it's freezing. We're freezing inside of there, and I'm sitting there trying to actually get things done. Where I'm at the stage where that shouldn't be happening, but it's still
mm,
happening. My girl is freaking out over like, what are we doing in Belgrade, Serbia, like without heating in like some random old Yugoslav apartment. But to then just sit there, and I remember going outside, like when it was at its worst there, and just looking around with some like classical music on my ears and just thinking, in a couple of years this will be like one of the funniest stories I have, because I know it won't last, but I will just have to accept it while it is there. And they come back. Like I've had several of these instances, maybe not as visual as Belgrade, but several of these instances later as well, where I'm just, in my mind, it's going crazy. And I'm thinking, okay, how do I even cope with this stress? But then the best way for me has just been to look at it like from a longer perspective and just think, okay, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, I won't care at all about this. If anything, I will look back to it with some sort of like love for the memory.
So your perspective, like the biggest thing that you're saying here is your stress tolerance has increased, but the way you manage that stress is you employ a long-term perspective and think this will pass. I just got to get through this, and then you keep going, you keep working. Have you ever shut down? Have you ever gone to the point where you feel like, you know what, I can't do this, I just need a break? Or have you always been like, this sucks, this stress, I'm just going to keep going?
Well, you'd have to define break in that case, because obviously as
unable to work, I would say.
Yeah, but for an extended period of time then, or like just permanently?
Period of time, because you're still here, you're still working.
Yeah,
so obviously
that was my point. So
yeah,
like obviously I haven't broke completely, but I've had times like earlier this year, like start of this year, we had a really tough like just shrinking that we were doing in the company, and it went to my head like more than it has done before. Not because of my circumstances and stuff; they were quite okay, but it was tough. Like, and it is tough. And what got me through that was like things didn't get better. That wasn't how I got through it. It was simply that like I kind of pitied myself for a while. And then at some point, again, this is my mindset from it, like I just got up again and thought like, I like the saying that your actions define your emotions don't dictate your actions. So if you think of, like, I remember this from, I learned it during high school when again, I had a different stress tolerance, which is that a tendency that a lot of people have is to, when they get home, like after a job or whatever, to just fall like face flat on the bed, on the sofa or whatever, like do something which like just mimics a bad emotion. While people think that you do that because you feel bad. But if you, on the flip side, go to the mirror, smile at yourself, like try to pitch yourself as you do with different sales calls, Darren, like if you do something which is like smiling, dancing, anything like that, try dance in front of the mirror and smile without feeling some sort of happiness, feeling that stress and that pain kind of like just disappears from your body, because it really does. So I believe that at some point, even though if you pity yourself like I did earlier this year, you need to just get your shit together and then just try to physically act like with good emotions, and then the emotions will come. You can do it the other way, but then you're just like you're ruining yourself.
I actually think that's very underrated. People don't do that enough, right? It's they will lean towards the they'll act out things that don't really give them a lot of emotion, a lot of positive feelings, right? So what you're describing here is someone will come home from work or school flat on the bed, or it could be on the couch or whatever, and then go on TikTok, go on scroll or just watch movies and kind of switch off their brain, right? And I think if you're able to say to yourself, it's like, hey, what gives me energy? I just went to school, or I just went to work. This was tough, but can I do something now that gives me energy, as opposed to, and that's considering that your job doesn't give you that, right? But can I do something now that gives me energy? And I think when you do that, you're able to get into this mindset of, okay, whew, right, here I am. Now let's do something, right? Or if you're just focusing on that activity. I think that's a very good piece of advice, especially for not just young people, but anyone who might go through their day and just feel like, I want this thing, but it's hard for me to go get it. And because actions, what you said about the actions and emotions, I think that's just so important for people to hear. When it then comes to your journey and your business today, Lasse, what is your vision when it comes to your company, Vuro?
Well, it's what I started touching upon, which is that we see, like, let me give you my thesis first of all. In 20 years, we will see businesses which are autonomously run by AI, where there's no
Mm-hmm.
humans involved, other than I wouldn't say founder, I would say the owner, because it would just be the owner of to use simple words to understand, the agents that create
Mm-hmm.
this business. Where basically, if we all agree, again, obviously you might not agree, and there might be people who don't agree, but my thesis is at least this, like, I'm certain that that will happen in the next 20 years, maybe give it 30, maybe just give it 10 for that sake. If that is going to happen, what is required to get there is like the big question which we've been asking ourselves for the past year, which is basically we've tried to define it down into to look at like what pillars needs to be there. You need a sales pillar, like which is marketing plus sale, basically just driving like traffic into some sort of product. The product needs to be there, needs to be automated by AI as well, which is basically the one which is easiest to picture right now, or to see, because it already exists. It's just software. So imagine just the software, because that's run by code, but it is created automatically by AI as well. You're kind of getting that as well now through different tools, but they're still like self-run. But imagine that you have an agent that is prompting the software creation, etc. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have the operations for the company then, or for the software company, or whatever you would call it, which is basically like, how do you, like, what are the strategic changes that you do, what things needs to be put in place at any different points, like basically just universal agents that can see the whole company and then
Mm-hmm.
just move around and fix things. So, like, again, as anyone knows, the two main things in any business is that you have a product and you have a way of selling it. And then
Mm-hmm.
anything else is just operation around this company, whether that is how you make the product better or how you sell it better. These things, like everything, which is just a process right now from any, like if you look at VC companies, or if you look at just people who regularly create startups, they have playbooks in their minds for how they do things. These playbooks, if you were to, and this might be a bit vague for some, but if you take these playbooks out of someone's head and you're able to put that onto paper in an actual step by step process, then there's no reason why you can't connect just the AI to all of these steps,
Mm-hmm.
and why you can't give. This is the point where it's hard to do it, like this point of time, which is you need to give AI just arms, like digital arms, basically. So the ability to like scroll around on the internet and click different things, do different tasks, etc. You have Anthropic coming out with like a version of this. I don't know if you saw that a month ago, Darren.
No, I'm not sure.
So basically, you can prompt like some sonnet model, I think, to like go to LinkedIn and search for this name, send him a message, etc. And then you
Oh yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
have, yeah, then you have an agent that
Yes.
basically has remote control to your laptop and is able to click around. But right now, that's extremely inefficient because it's just prompt chaining. So just many different prompts and actions that are breaking down to do the task, which just costs a lot of money right now. But that will
Mm-hmm.
become like basically free within some
Mm-hmm.
years, because
Mm-hmm.
the technology is going that way. So when you have that ability to have agents that can scroll around the web and do different things, and you're able to automatically create products, and you find ways to allocate agents to also sell these products, then you have an autonomous business. So then the whole question is just who owns the system to create these businesses, because there are no humans involved in them.
And so your vision then, if you're raising the question of who owns the systems, it sounds like you want to own the systems that runs the businesses. Is that the vision that you're having?
At least a part of them, because obviously at some point there's always going to be mega corporations that go in and buy these things, and who basically just develop it faster than others can. Hopefully we will have a lot of these things being open source, but it's not a given. And so what I'm thinking is that we want to build this, and I see it being feasible to be built as well. Whether there's regulatory challenges on the way there, maybe, but I don't know. If we work our asses off for the next 15 years and we build 30% of the components that are necessary to have that system working, then I would probably still sleep good at night, because then we've built things that are really, really valuable. Obviously, that will come back financially as well to the ones who've built it. But it's a really I'm saying it's a vague concept of thinking an AIV, so an AI-driven business. But if we were to make it simple and just think that it's whatever business you see right now, but there's just no humans involved, everything is software online, then who starts these if everything is done by AI? Is that just one entity that has made it and owned it? Probably, on top of my mind, I would guess that you will have different sorts of owners of different variations of systems that creates different types of businesses, etc. But all of these might also be just made out of different components, because, for example, we have no intention of building, at least for now, software which is, for example, we used this a couple of days ago, Darren. It was a Y Combinator backed company. Was it Hyperbound? It was called the software we looked at. Yeah. So basically, a software like that, which is effectively what they're doing, is that they're training sales reps with the AI avatars for cold calls,
Hyperbound,
and different variations. And you have alternatives to that as well. I have some friends building it also, which is AI sales reps who do the calling, so who's not the leads as they are in Hyperbound. And all of these tech components need to be put in place for this overall system. But we don't really have any intention of building all of the different components. Most of them will probably just be integrated with other people's solutions.
Fascinating. So in terms of starting a business or running a business that is fully autonomous, what dangers does that pose to the workforce, the labor force, people that actually have jobs today? Is that going to be a threat to them? Or, what should the mindset be of someone who is probably on the younger side, looking to work in this space, or looking to, go into a career where my job might be replaced in 10 years? Is that something, that they should consider? And if so, what should they keep in mind?
It's a really fascinating question. I'm not sure if I would say cool, because for some people it might not be that cool of a question. First of all, a disclaimer there, I'm by no means an expert on actual, I use AI for use cases, and I try to follow along with how the progression of the different models are going, but I don't really know more stuff than that to the actual technology. But what I'm seeing is, and what is, I think I can say that because it's mostly defined by anyone who actually follows the space. There will be a time where we live in post-labor economics, which is basically that there is no work for humans left. Because it's just a matter of time until you have humanoid robots that are plugged in with AI, it's not that many years until we have just AI that is smarter than the smartest person alive. And when you have all of these things put in place and you're able to take it out in the physical world, like it's just a time question before we don't have any work to do. And there will probably be a phase there where things get extremely bad before they get good, in terms of like just poverty, people being taken out of work, regulations not being in place. For example, like you have UBI, Universal Basic Income, which will come at some point, or because people will need it if there's no work to do, but there's still value being produced. But who knows who's going to take people out of work and how long it takes to actually regulate that so that the values come back to people. Like I'm by no means like a socialist for that sake. Like I'm extremely pro capitalism, but I do also realize that you can't, like you can't envision the society to actually function in a post-labor world without some sort of social security, like for everyone, for no reason whatsoever either. Because the like, imagine in, if we look at it like a bit more concretely, if you see the jobs that we're talking about, because I get this question often, Darren, which is like, what thing would I study right now if I were to study and like try to make a career? And I think the only good answer, if I were to look at like a 60-year long career, is something which is just prompt related right now. So how to use AI, or potentially like something within like medicine, or like nursing or something like that. I think that will take a longer time to outsource than anything else. But if we look at like our traditional jobs, or just office work, like we're effectively doing, like being entrepreneurs and stuff, it's, as I said, like if we in 20 years have this system that can put out businesses like autonomously, who will hire you who has like an hourly rate of like $100, when you can hire like something that has an hourly rate of like a couple of cents and is way smarter than us? Like
Yeah.
it's going to be hopeless to be consultants on such things, because humans are going to be like, it's silly to think of, and I might be going to like sci-fi, like in a too much of a sci-fi direction, but humans are at some point just going to be like a chunk of meat. Like we can do some physical labor still in some years, but when it comes to thinking, like it's just humans. Like we just deploy the AI, because you would never, like imagine 10 years down the line, because we know for certain that in 10 years we will have language models that are way smarter than any of us. You wouldn't come to me and ask for growth strategies. You would go to like some sort of model that you have to ask for it. Because if you come to me, I will sit there and think, and we will spend 30 minutes thinking. I will analyze your situation, and then I will go, yeah, okay, I have a couple of ideas. This, that. Like I will need to think more of it. While if you like spur it by some AI machine that is way smarter than me and that can give you the results in like a couple of seconds, then why would you ever even consider about going and paying me? Like it makes no sense. And the element here with labor, which is interesting for entrepreneurs in that sake, is that when this happens, like you would think that, for example, if you think just a basic service, so like running ads for someone, which was what I got into like several years ago, typically that has been charged, like you would get beginners in to run ads for you for like $1,000 a month, if you have like a decent budget for actually running the ads on Facebook. While when you have AI models that can do it, like it will just be like human time. When human time is not involved anymore, it will just be a race to the bottom in terms of costs. And when you can have AI come into the product side as well with supply chain, then it will be a race to the bottom in terms of the prices of things that we buy today. So imagine groceries. Groceries will at one point basically like cost nothing again. They will just cost things based on like how much you have of it effectively in different regions. It won't be charged based on how difficult it is to, for example, like keep it stored, to like to get it to different places. Like in Norway, for example, it's obviously going to be more expensive with groceries than it is in like South Africa, for example, just because of the cost of the labor. When the cost of the labor is near to zero, like the groceries will just be priced based on how much there is of it. And the same
Mhm.
thing will go for any type of product or service that we want to sell. That when human time is not involved in the equation, it would just be a matter of like who can do it the cheapest.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
thereby, like I think it will be things will be very fruitful, like when we're a couple of years or decades post this point where people start losing their jobs. But until
Mhm.
then, I don't really know. Again, you could say that that's why I'm doing it, because I'm terrified of like what would happen in that transition phase. But I don't really know. You'll have to get some other experts who sit deeper onto it to actually
Yeah.
give educated opinions on it.
I think it's very fascinating indeed because, creating websites, even the platform that we took a look at, Hyperbound, right? Where you could essentially practice your cold calling skills, your sales skills. That right there, who is not to say that that model right there could do the actual cold call, could do a real conversation, right, in the future. So even a high skill like sales is today is most likely going to be replaced. And so you have all these different skills that are over time are going to just be replaced with AI. And then you're sitting there and you're thinking, so that can do my job at 100 times cheaper or 50 times
Mm.
cheaper or whatever it is. And the only cost would probably be what, electricity and some processor, whatever that is. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be so incredibly cheap and the results are better. Because one thing that you also mentioned was, as a consultant, right? If you come with an idea, and if I were to come to you, you're going to sit there and think for 30 minutes. Yeah. Okay, this is what I think, but I'm going to need some more time to think about it. But then you have an AI, which has also, by the way, no biases, right? And I think that's one
Mm.
thing with humans. We have all these biases, past experiences, and one thing that I've learned, it's incredibly challenging to keep making correct decisions without biases, right? It's
Mm.
it's they're always going to be there. So you have to be very aware of, are there any biases in my decision or in my thinking right now? But even as a top tier consultant who has great models, as humans, we're not computers. And so there will always still be a few flaws here and there, but an AI could just say, hey, here you go,
Mm.
with just clean, logical solution to how this could work. And I think it would be interesting to see how AI will also, in the areas where humans are involved or persuasion needs to be involved, how well AI is going to adapt to that. But I think, like you said, within 20 years, as when the model advances, I think they'll overcome that as well. I think they'll become almost self-aware in a sense, right? Where they're gonna, because the way I see AI is right now, we're programming them to learn using data, but will it get to the point, and I think this is the case, that AI is now going to be able to learn from itself and just, like, okay, that's that, and they can essentially add data to themselves without any prompts.
You
And
can
what,
already make that happen. It's just a bit clunky if you set it up, like even with like simple tools. But basically, what you're referring to is, and this is where like I can confirm some parts, which, for example, as you mentioned with salespeople, like
Mhm.
being AI, a sales rep who's an AI who remembers the 10 million lost conversations that it did and who analyzed all of them based on different frameworks to figure out, okay, what types of waiting times in before when they said things, like what type of emotional addition should they add to these types of sentences, etc. Imagine these analysis being ran on every single call for millions and millions and millions of times, and then you have like the AI who calls you and say, "Hi, is this Darren?" just has all of this in the knowledge base. So when you respond, it just knows exactly where to trigger you. And also,
Mm,
what the AI can do is that it probably has all of the data about Darren and how Darren also operates. So, like,
mm,
you can't do that as a human in that
mm,
case.
mm,
And like what you're mentioning, like with the Hyperbound and these types of software, you already have them doing outbound calls. You have, for example, Air AI, while
mm,
the thing with it is that it's still lagging a bit. There are some loops which makes you understand that it is AI if you like are actually onto it. But for a certain generation, then that's impossible to see.
mm,
And
mm,
it's right now being used, but it's more so being used for volume because you can have. I think I heard this like another day from someone I spoke to that the average like normal sales rep does like 60 dials per day and like a full-time day if they do cold calling, while Air AI and these types of like AI dialers, they call around like 2,000 per day because they don't sleep. They don't take like a bathroom break or they have to eat or they get fatigued or anything like that. It just keeps looping like over and over and over and over again as long as you feed it someone to speak to.
mm, mm. That is crazy. It's going to be very interesting to see the direction that AI takes over the next few years. So, in terms of then the life, I want to go a little bit back into entrepreneurship, Lasse, and talk about the life that entrepreneurship has given you. You know, what would you say is one of the biggest benefits of being an entrepreneur as opposed to having a 9 to 5 job?
It has to be freedom for me. It
Mm,
sounds like it's the most used up word in terms of entrepreneurship and why to go into it, especially among younger entrepreneurs. But I just can't get around it. That now I've lived it for so long that I don't really consider it freedom to that extent anymore. But I do remember how it was when I came out of school and I just figured out, okay, I'll do this on my own. And then being able to just go wherever, do whatever on a day's notice, like doing a pivot, like into figuring out, okay, this is cool. I want to do this.
mm,
Or like, I don't like this anymore. Okay, let me change it up, etc. Like that ability to just choose for yourself, it has been like if I were to go back and try to motivate 16-year-old Lasse to start earlier, I would just give him like the life, or I would give him the opportunity to see the life with freedom versus without freedom, and to just
mm,
make him wake up earlier.
mm,
That is like it has to be the key thing. I don't know if it is that for everyone. Like for me, as I said, like with some problems with authority, like from earlier, than freedom from any type of authority is something that is just compelling to me.
And if there was one piece of advice you would give to someone just starting out, you know, we did already touch on some very, very good lessons and points that you raised at the beginning of our conversation, but you know, what would be one thing that you would tell an aspiring entrepreneur or someone that has a dream to start on their own?
I would say like plan plan extremely well for the next week, and then just know why you're doing it. So have an idea of why you're doing it 10 years down the line as well. Because if
Mm,
you have that goal 10 years down the line and you plan each week with that in mind, I think you will get far as long as you
mm,
actually sit down and set a time for it. Like
mm,
the other thing to it is obviously also just make your calendar. Like I'm
mm,
not on that thing with make your bed and stuff. Like I would never do that myself. Probably never did either. But my calendar has to be set up and neat.
mm,
My bed
mm,
doesn't, and
mm.
that has at least done wonders for me.
Amazing. Well, Lasse, thank you very much for joining the podcast, man. And we really appreciate you taking the time as well. It was very interesting talking to you. Again, the youngest person that I've had on this podcast, but it goes to show that, you know, as an entrepreneur, you can come very far and looks like you're doing great, man. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, Darren.